And what I've now learned is most kids with dyslexia are incredibly bright children. Their brains just work differently. But, again, these were my fears. And I think the reason so many parents and people delay going through this and finding out what's wrong is because of the fears of what other people think, the fears of maybe they did something wrong, maybe they caused this. And what bothers me so much is who cares what his file needs to say this so he can get the help he needs.
I'm Nicole Holcomb, attorney by day and podcaster by night, a former educator, school counselor, and administrator, and mom to a 9-year-old daughter with dyslexia, who loves all things Harry Potter, Minecraft, and science. A few years ago, she was identified with dyslexia, and our life seemed to turn upside down for a while, quite literally. I created the Dyslexia Mom Life podcast to help you navigate the upside down journey of dyslexia. You got this. If you're wanting to thrive as a mom in this dyslexia journey, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Mother's Day may be celebrated one day of the year, but here on the Dyslexia Mom Life podcast, we are celebrating moms for the entire month of May. Today, I'm talking to one of the 8 amazing warrior moms who are sharing their personal parenting dyslexia journey with us. Grab your earbuds and enjoy learning from moms who are taking you behind the scenes of parenting dyslexic kiddos. All right, I am delighted to welcome to the show Rachel Pitzel, and thank you so much for being on Dyslexia Mom Life podcast and for being part of this special Mother's Day series. I'm just excited to welcome so many moms to May and really an opportunity to appreciate everything that you're doing, because so much of what we do as a mom really is what they say, invisible parenting, right? So thank you so much for being here. And I can't wait for us to talk more about your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So one of the things that we're doing this month is really just kind of, digging into the story and really sharing some pieces of your dyslexia journey as a mom. And so I'm going to kind of ask you some questions as it relates to just kind of breaking it down into pieces. And that way, we can get everything fleshed out and we can really get to some key points that I want people to hear. So Rachel, if you don't mind, I think, can we just kind of start at the beginning when you started seeing some signs that something was going on with your son and you're like, maybe you had an aha moment of there's something more here. Do you mind sharing kind of those early pieces of when your journey kind of started?
Definitely. So I'll just go back a tiny bit. So my son is a July birthday. And we just always kind of thought he was like a little, like what I would call like young for his age. And at his preschool though, he was in the highest class. And so when we were going into his first day of kindergarten, we had kind of like a meet and greet day. And he ended up in a class of kids TK loopers, which means they were in TK with the same teacher and they could choose to stay with the same teacher the next year. And we were there, and there were kids who were reading the calendar, the months of the year, and they were saying January, January. And I was like, I don't know if grade is what a J is. Like, I don't know if this is the right class for him. So I went and spoke with the teacher. And at that point, they had moved the TK that was at our school to another site. There just wasn't enough room. And I had kind of spoken with her about it. And she then offered me the opportunity to do TK. Usually they're very strict with the birthdays. And then I had spoken to her and I just said, regardless, he needs to be in a different class. His class actually was 17 boys with only like 6 girls, which I was also a little worried about. And so I was able to move him to a different class. And I did ask her, I just said, if we do kindergarten and I feel like he needs to do it again, can we do that? And she was a little blunt with me and was kind of like, you could, but like, we don't really have that happen here. And I remember that was kind of like my first initial, like, wow. And then very shortly after, I think we have like back to school night in LA. It was like 8 or 9 days after school starts. And it was very abundantly clear that he was much what I would just still call younger. Like all the other kids were like writing their names and stuff. And it was very easy to find his stuff around the classroom because I would just look for the chicken scratch.
Right.
And he also happened to be in a very academically advanced year for whatever reason that year. But so they would bring home these things called like sight words. Some people call them rainbow words. And these are words that you can't really, you can't really read them out like phonetically. You just kind of have to memorize them.
Right.
And Grayson struggled mightily with these. I mean, we were on the pretty much like the initial list almost the whole year. And I would do them with him after school. And he was then, his kindergarten did have homework. They later stopped doing that, which I like. But we would do these words, and I had taught him like the sound th, so like the, and then he knew the word at. So we would work on the word that. And again, I know you can't normally blend sight words, but that you can blend. So I would do that. So we would do the at. And so he would say that. And then he would literally look at me and say, said. And this happened for months, like 6 months. And I was just like pulling my hair out. And I had two younger brothers and sisters who were 5 and 7 years younger than me. So I always kind of helped them with their schoolwork and learned how to read. And I was at such a loss. I'm like, why is he saying said? Like, where does he get said from? Interestingly, we just had his triannual IEP review this week, and his speech teacher said actually that a lot of kids say S for a TH. So she said that could have been like an initial blend where he was getting it from. And so I had so many conversations with this teacher. She and I became really close. And, it was just very obvious to both of us that he was behind. And then I believe it was either January, February, when I kind of had an aha moment where I was like, wow, he's kind of where a lot of the kids were back in September now. And so I'd reached out to her that morning and I said, I really think Gray needs to repeat kindergarten. Like he's just, he's not where these other kids are. And I feel like he's just starting to become ready now to like be at this kindergarten level. And she said, it's so funny. I had this moment last night and I was going to reach out to you. And she said, I was really nervous because a lot of parents are really, I don't want to know if hostile is the right word for it, but can kind of take that,
Not
the wrong way.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was just good that we were on the same page. And at that point, I had asked for him to, kind of be reviewed because I knew something was wrong. And she said that they have to wait until these things show up in testing. And so she said, let's just have him redo kindergarten next year. We were able to have him stay in the same class. Sometimes they have make the kids move teachers when they repeat. So we did that. And then again in the fall, it was October. And I'm like, okay, we're still working on that. He's still not able to do that. He's still looking at it. Every time he would look at the word, it was a brand new word. He'd never seen it before, even if we'd done the word 5 minutes before. And then so again, she said, this has to show up on Dibble's testing. And she actually said she had to fight a lot to get his testing to be done. And we were at LAUSD at the time, which is a really large school district. And so I believe it was finally in January where she reached out to me and said, hey, it's starting to show up on testing now. I can submit this review. You need to go in, so the basic process is you go in, or at least in LA, this is what we did. You just can write anything on a piece of paper. You just write like your kid's name and kind of what your concern is, and you request an IEP formally. So we did that. And then like kind of went through the process. And his teacher was so helpful to me. But basically, so they have a school psychologist, and randomly it turns out I knew her through her husband was our realtor. So she was the psychologist, and they do like a battery of different tests. At the time I had no idea. Like I didn't know what dyslexia was. My understanding of dyslexia was it was switching letters. So like switching a B or a D, things like that. Because growing up, I had a kid with dyslexia who was always in the same elementary school class as me. And I have to be honest with you here. I was always the kid that learned things really quickly. I loved school. You and I talked about, like grad school and these types of things. Like I never really had to study. And I personally, I don't want to say I looked down on kids, but I just was like, what's wrong with them? Like I just didn't understand it because my brain didn't work that way. So, I think that there are a lot of misconceptions, in society, and especially in the educational system. Like a lot of times his teacher also had said, and again, like I adore this teacher, but do you really want this to be like on his file? And that's something I have such a personal issue with, but we'll kind of go into that later. But yeah, so that's how it happened. But it took about a year and a half for us to get this review, the IEP review.
Right. And, something you said, Rachel, too, that really resonated with me was the part that, that I don't want to say that stigma, but what other people think they want you to know about it being on their file, or they're being labeled, or let's just wait and see, all those things that you hear. And that's why I think it's so important that you're on the podcast, and that people are speaking out, and that we're trying to grow awareness, so that way moms will know, right? And they'll keep pushing and asking those questions. So that's so important. So you got through that evaluation piece. So now we're still in second year of kindergarten. Is that where we're at in the story? Okay. So
Yeah.
what happens next? So you go through the evaluation, you go to probably an IEP meeting to determine if he's eligible. Tell us a little bit about that experience. And was that at the point in his journey that there were some pieces put in place for remediation, or did you have to do some of that stuff privately? Like, I don't know a lot about that part of your story. So if you don't mind
Right.
sharing some of those pieces with us.
Sure. So I actually was very fortunate because I ended up having this connection to this school psychologist. I was just pulling my hair out. I didn't know what was wrong, and I was working with him every day. And I'm like, why is he not making this progress? And as a parent, it's so frustrating, especially dedicating so much time. And again, I didn't know what was. I don't want to say wrong because there's nothing wrong with him, but I didn't know what that he
Yeah,
had
you
a
didn't know what
neuro.
the need was to address. Yeah, if you don't know
Right.
what to do to help, then yeah, that makes sense. You gotta, and you're right, because sometimes when you find out, it's like almost like a relief, like a aha, like, okay, now I know, and now I can put a plan together. But then there's a whole nother flood of emotions that come once you know, and then you're
100,
yes,
100%. Yes. Yes. So I'll hit that in a second. So I had just reached out to her. I got connected with her on Facebook DMs, and I just reached out to her, and I was crying. I was so upset and so frustrated. I'm like, I'm doing these site works with him every day. I'm doing all this stuff. Nothing is helping. He's not making progress. And then I said, it seems like I had been doing so much research. And I said, it seems like this is like maybe a processing issue. And then I said, it's definitely not dyslexia because he doesn't swap the letters. And she said, well, so she said, that's actually a huge what's the right word? It's a fallacy that a lot of people think that
right,
kids do that. And she said, so that's not dyslexia. Dyslexia is a phonetic issue and like a blending issue. And now I've obviously learned like so many more things, but she basically said, in this meeting, like I can't tell you this until the IEP, but like heavily hinted that like I should
mm-hmm.
do some research on this because we had spring break and a couple of other things. So we didn't actually end up having his IEP meeting until April. Obviously, there's like hard deadlines and stuff, but there was just a lot of things that were going on during this time period.
Right.
So having the IEP and finding out what was going on with him, because I mean, all these moms here are probably thinking a lot of the same things. I worried that my child was, I don't want to say the stupid word, but like I worried that there was something wrong with him. I worried that he wasn't bright. Then you were like, he's never going to succeed. He's never going to go to college. He's not going to be, you go down this
Right.
whole spiral. And it's really, really, really scary when you don't have an answer. And I'm a person who like needs to comprehend like why things are happening to like
Right.
make sense of my world.
Mm-hmm.
So during his IEP meeting, there were so many things that were helpful to me. Like his processing time was the fastest that they had ever done at the school. And every single person there told me that. So they're like, he's a very bright kid. And what I've now learned is most kids with dyslexia are incredibly, incredibly bright children. Their brains just work differently. But, again, these were my fears. And I think the reason so many parents and people delay going through this and finding out what's wrong is because of the fears of what other people think, the fears of maybe they did something wrong, maybe they caused this, the fears of, like you said, like the mark on the file. And what bothers me so much is who cares what his file said? His file needs to say this so he can get the help he needs. He will always need help. He'll always need extra time. He'll always need certain supports. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I've now met so many brilliant, brilliant, brilliant people who are top attorneys and just the tops of their professions.
Absolutely.
And they're like, I'm still terrible at spelling. The computer has saved me. And there's nothing wrong with having a neurodiverse mind, but like, first you have to know what's going on, as you said. So that aha moment and the explanation of, well, he doesn't his brain can't do this the same way. Like it needs to go through different processes and he needs to learn differently. That just one explains so many things. And then of course, as a parent, I felt terrible because I'm like, I was wondering what was wrong with him. I was internally so frustrated with him because I'm working with him and not making any progress. And so there's just a lot of frustrations that come about with this stuff. So the
You know what
I
else? Oh, let me stop you there for a second, Rachel. And the other thing too, you were talking about a minute ago, I think what really stumps people, especially in the early stages where, we think of dyslexia being those backwards numbers and letters, and people say it's developmental. And so because they are so bright, a lot of dyslexics are, because the way they think, they are so very creative and have sometimes very extensive vocabulary, even really young. It really stumps us as a parent, and then it stumps the educators who don't know a whole lot about dyslexia. Maybe they've heard the word but aren't educated on it, so to speak. It is such a frustration at the beginning because you're like, it's not making sense, it's not lining up. Like it just, and like you said, I can remember on our journey too, we would work on those sight words and we would work on those sight words, and Thursday night, the night before the test, the was, I don't know, a tree or something. I mean, it was completely not even the same word. And we would just be in tears because I'm like, we've worked all week. Why can't we get it? And then she would do something funny or, and I'm like, oh, she's trying just not to do this. And you get so frustrated as a parent. And then later when you look back, you're like, oh, you just that mom guilt hits you of, oh, that was a sign I missed. But if we're not educated about dyslexia, we don't know to look for it. And so, yeah.
100. That is so important because I kept feeling like he was being lazy and he wasn't trying. But like the neurodiverse mind it's so hard for them when they're in these situations that they're naturally like shifting to other things. And you said like the creativity and all these other things. So I just want the moms and parents and caregivers listening that I want to like allay your guilt because it's just something that there's not enough awareness about. There's so many things that are going on that you would just not know about unless you have this education. And as you said earlier, advocacy is the most important thing. And we are the only people who can really advocate for our kids. And so you have to be like, just that it's so important to not feel like you're doing something wrong when you're being a strong advocate, because if you don't advocate for your kids, nobody else is going to, and it's so, so incredibly important to do so. And the fact that his teacher and I had gone, and his teacher even said she had to battle the head of, I think it was the vice principal, who's like the gatekeeper for IEPs. She had to like literally show evidence for like 3 months to try to get this IEP done. So it is not always an easy thing to get done.
Right. Unfortunately, you're right on that one, especially working through those initial pieces because there is so much, I guess, not awareness and misunderstanding about what it looks like. And so much of, well, they see other characteristics of the student that, they might be great at math or science, or they're able to recall things because they memorize things. And so it's that disconnect. And so sometimes educators just can't wrap their mind around what's going on, except for the ones that are educated on dyslexia. They see it, but we don't have enough of those, unfortunately, right now.
Okay, so what you just said is so important. So the good at math, in my experience, kids with dyslexia tend to be incredible at math, incredible at science. And that was her thing. She was like, we can only test if they're doing poorly in both. And now I've learned that one of the biggest signs for dyslexia is if your child is excelling at one thing, they should be within the same range with reading and writing. And if they're not, that is one of the biggest hallmarks of dyslexia. In fact, most kids who perform poorly in reading and perform poorly in math, that's actually not dyslexia, because it's a very different thing going on. So it's just a little pet peeves of mine.
Right, absolutely. So you have the meeting, and so at this point we're in kindergarten, but you're at the end of the second time of kindergarten. Is he at that point able to get some services, or is it not until first grade, or do you do some things over the summer? Tell us a little bit about how that piece of the journey starts.
Yeah, so we were incredibly fortunate at this point for so many reasons. So he did start getting services. It was late in the year. His school actually paid for his research teacher to get Orton Gillingham trained that summer, because there were other kids with dyslexia. And then there started to be a really big movement both in California and in LAUSD, especially with parents who have older dyslexic kids. So we were because Orton Gillingham training is very expensive.
Yes.
So that was an amazing piece. And then randomly, his best friend, who we met the next year, had a very similar processing issue. He
Mm-hmm.
advanced a lot quicker, but he was actually in the same Orton Gillingham resource class. So he got resource. It was 60 minutes a week, which was amazing. But here is the big piece. So I looked for a private Orton Gillingham tutor, and it was so hard for me in LA personally. They're just, everyone that I reach out to is completely full. It's extremely expensive. I've heard in other places it's not as expensive, but it is expensive. And I randomly was having lunch with a colleague one day, and she had told me that she had had a similar experience and connected me with a tutor, and that's now my son's tutor. But it's really expensive. I mean, we pay a lot. I'm sure now that we're in San Diego as opposed to LA, we could probably find somebody else, but we have such an amazing tutor. I was really hoping I could find a male just so that he could connect with. There are very few male educators in elementary education. And so I just really wanted that for Gray. And so initially he started going 2 days a week. It was a big commitment. We had a long drive, especially on the way home, and it's expensive, like I said. And this is just something where my heart personally breaks, because there's so much advocacy involved, and I feel like there's just not enough of these resources available to families who might not have as many resources as we did. And at the time, it was a big stretch for us to pay for this, but it was so important for me. But it's really hard because so many kids aren't getting enough of the supports that they need. Like the 60 minutes in school a week would not have been sufficient. And
Right.
the resource teacher that he had was actually talking to his private tutor. So they were actually doing the same lessons they both had access to the same Orton Gillingham materials. So that really, really, really helped him progress.
Great. Yeah, you don't hear that very often, at least in the South where I'm at. You don't hear that very often. So that's amazing. And you're right, because in the public school, there's only so much they can do. They're usually a little bit larger groups, and they're not hitting it daily or as much as they need to. And so many times families do have to supplement to get that additional help, especially when at the beginning or depending on their severity of dyslexia. So as your son was finishing up kindergarten and going into first grade, and now you've got this 2 times a week private tutoring. Tell me a little bit about what you started seeing. What were some things you started seeing from your son as far as his differences and I mean differences in a good way, like how was he responding to tutoring? You probably started seeing a different child at home.
100%. So we got fortunate here in a lot of ways. One, we adore his tutor, has become a very close friend. He loves going to his tutoring. Like it's something he enjoys. Like he wants to hang out with his tutor in real life. And it's just really fun. And he does all these very, the way that they do the tutoring is very interactive, and it incorporates a lot of senses, which I think Gray really likes. And one of the most important things that his tutor has worked with him on over the years, and I think this is also very important for parents to hear, is his confidence. I mean, I think it's really hard. He knew that he was, even though he repeated kinder, and I always stress, if you want a repeated grade, kinder is the best grade to do. But some kids would ask him, how come you didn't go on to the next grade? And he, even though like I said, he was young, he knew, he'll say, now I'm supposed to be in fourth grade. And I'm like, whoa, are you really? I mean, and there are kids that are older than him in his classes also, but the confidence piece is the most important thing, because when you're not surrounded by as many kids who are neurodiverse, it's hard to know that you're great. And he thrives in so many different areas. And that's what his tutor was the most helpful at. Also, his first grade teacher randomly had dyslexia. It wasn't random, but his first kinder teacher specifically put him in this class. His teacher had dyslexia and really, 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 really helped him. He also ended up in a group in that class, and there were 6 kids who were all about the same reading level as him, and his best friend that he had made then in first grade was in that one, and that was the one he did a resource class with. So we just got really fortunate in all these different areas.
I think one of the things too, I was listening, is that one thing I want people to hear that I think is key to this journey is finding that tutor, because we were in the same boat early on before we moved on. We're actually in an immersion school, so every child in our school is dyslexic at our daughter's school, and every teacher is OG trained, but it is private. It is expensive, but that's anyway, a whole different story for a different day. But I say that to say early on, though, before we knew she was dyslexic, we actually had an OG reading tutor. I didn't even know she was OG trained at the time, right? But she was amazing. And to this day, like you said, we're very close with her. I talk to her, my daughter chats with her. And I think that piece, that relationship piece with your child and whoever is working with them on the remediation piece, that relationship has got to be good, because they work so hard for them when they know they're in their corner. And I've not met, a tutor that wasn't that way, but I know there are some out there. And then every child is different as far as their personality. So I just want people to know it is okay. If you find someone that's not a good fit, that's okay. Adjust and look for someone that is. And that's why that, to me, that part of the journey, not only the early identification, but also finding the right tutors to work with our children is so key, because they really do help with that self-esteem, and they really do help them, just kind of come out of their shell, and they're going to work so hard for them. So it's okay. I guess what I'm saying is I'm giving you permission right now to ask questions, to, like you did, network with people you trust. Don't just look on a Facebook group, but ask someone you actually know that knows that person. Like, really do a little bit of research, and then talk to the person, interview the person, make sure that they seem like they're going to be a good fit, and then give it a little try and see how it works. Cause I think that makes all the difference sometimes.
100%. And I categorize that all into my like advocacy and like constantly
Yes.
asking
Mm-hmm.
questions and like, because like you said, it's okay for things not to always be a good fit. The other piece that I think is so important in this advocacy one is making sure your child has the right teacher. Obviously, like you have a different experience. There was Norton Gillingham School by us. It was like $45,000 a year in LA, which is a lot.
Yeah, I get it. We have one of those here too, but she's not at that one.
Yeah, there's no other LA was a very expensive place. But to me, the most important piece that I can do on an annual basis is making sure my child has the right teacher. He needs to be in the right classroom. My son he still has some sensory processing stuff. This is another topic. And I think this often goes hand in hand with dyslexia, not always, but generally a lot of kids with dyslexia have some sensory things. So he needs to be in the right classroom. He needs to be in a more soothing environment, not a ton of stuff going on. It's overwhelming for him. He needs to be in a very highly structured classroom, but also with somebody who's very nurturing, and can really help him with that stuff and can make little adaptations. So, there we go. I'm like, that's the right word. On the fly.
Right.
So like, I'll give you an example. So last year, in the past, we had always kind of known who the teacher was going to be. And so we would suggest it during his IEP. And what they usually do is the teachers get together that are in the grade that your child just had, and they kind of decide who goes in which one. But sometimes that can shuffle in summer. So my son's first grade teacher was like, I'm not sure who's going to be best for second grade. The second grade teacher who we really wanted was moving, who I thought would be best. There was one teacher who was extremely academically rigorous, which was not be a good choice for him. There was another teacher who I thought was kind of the Disneyland teacher. Her classroom was, it was just, there's so much going on, and Gray would have been overwhelmed. And then there was another teacher who I personally loved as a human, but she wasn't rigid and structured, and she was always behind where the other teachers were. So I was like just stressing all summer. I'm like, who's going to be this fourth teacher? Where is the right place for him? And then, so when I found out who the next teacher was going to be, like the principal always told me I can't tell her what class, but I went in over summer, made an appointment. I just said, these are the reasons that I'm concerned about like certain teachers. And I didn't say anything in particular, but like the right teacher is the most important thing that you can do for your child, because that's the one who's going to be there every day. And that could really impact their self-confidence. It can impact so many things that are going on in the classroom. And just somebody that's going to really be caring for them.
Right. It's because there are so many pieces of that, the myths and the misconceptions and the awareness piece. And, we do a lot of work as parents educating the educators, but at the end of the day, you're right. That teacher, if it's not a good fit, and we can probably all raise our hands right now and say we've all had a teacher like that and we survived that. But for our kids with dyslexia, especially these elementary years, we just cannot even go that route. Like, we have to try to, like you said, be an advocate and really listen and kind of, and you're right. A lot of times teachers in the building and the teachers you currently have will kind of give you a head nod, no, I don't know about that one. And so sometimes you can get that information, but it can, unfortunately, it's strong to say do damage, but it really can. If you get the wrong teacher with your child, it can be an academic and emotional, nightmare, really. It's not a good situation. So, but then, like you said, you don't all, not everybody gets the opportunity to choose their teacher. But I think I love what you did, Rachel, which was being proactive and going in and saying, you're not pointing out, Miss Smith or whoever to say, and I hope that's nobody's name there, but like Miss Smith is, I don't want her, but to go in instead of pointing fingers at people, going in saying, these are the characteristics that my child would respond well to, and that I feel like they would grow. And when you appeal to an educator that way, they want your child to be successful. So I think that's very smart to do that. And I was talking to a mom the other day, when we, and really stressing on the point of partnership with schools, because you really have to have that partnership. And it sounds like you have that, and you were smart early on to say, you know what, I've got to go in and have conversation. And you were lucky enough to get some really great teachers at the beginning that you could have that positive experience with, because you're right, that part of it is so pivotal to making sure our children are successful. But we have to also be open to having conversations. And it's a little bit of PR work sometimes to kind of finesse that relationship. And if you go in, hands in the air, screaming, hollering, yes, you're emotional, but you got to kind of get that under check, because when you go in, you've got to appeal to them as a person, appeal to
Yes.
them with what your child needs. And you can get so much further with that.
100%. Like, the more with honey than what I didn't sleep the best last night. So sorry, Mike. But that PR element, I am a firm believer that you get everybody on your side. I get the school secretary. I become friends with her.
Absolutely. You're a team,
Yes, I get I try to develop a relationship with the principal. I want to have as many people on my team as I possibly can. And it is a PR thing. I go out of my way to say hi to them, pick up, and you just do all the things. And I will say one other thing was, when I saw the class list for second grade, all of his best friends were in one particular teacher. Like, his whole class was pretty much sent there except for a few others. And I had this heartbreaking moment, like, oh my gosh, did I mess up? Like, is this going to be hard it was totally fine. They still get to play together. They do so many things together.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he had a lot of friends that were in his original or in his second kinder class that were in this other classroom. The teacher was so phenomenal for him. So, there's a lot of moments as a parent where you're like, am I doing the right thing? Okay, now I did this. Did I mess this up? It's really hard to be a parent of a child with dyslexia, because you're constantly questioning things. But I'm also a firm believer that a lot of times things are happening for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to trust, a lot of this stuff.
Right. So let me ask you one quick question, but you did just a great transition, because we're going to transition there. But before we do, what grade is Gray in this year?
He's in third grade.
He's in third grade. Okay, great.
Yes.
And so you were just saying a little piece that I want to kind of go that direction for a few minutes, which is, especially for the moms who are listening, many of the moms that listen to my show are just starting on this journey, or maybe they're stuck somewhere on their journey, or they're just a little bit down the way, right? Like, it's all still kind of fresh and they're trying to get information. But one of the pieces I wanted us to talk about today, which you kind of went that way just a little bit, which is, when we're raising children with dyslexia, there are challenges and there are definitely rewards. And so you kind of brushed on that a little bit here a second ago. So can we talk just, a little bit about, what were or what are, right, some of the challenges that you see? And I mean, challenges, not really, obviously not in a negative way, but, it's what I call that invisible parenting that I talked about earlier, which is, there's so many things that happen as a mom raising a child with dyslexia that your neighbors don't see, your best friend doesn't see, your child's, there's just, your sister, whoever, they just don't see some of those pieces. But why I think it's so important for us to share those pieces now is because the mom that's experiencing those now, that's like, okay, I'm completely alone. No one, am I the only one? I just think it's important, if you're comfortable sharing, I would love to hear some of those thoughts on that challenging piece of, yes, there are some invisible parenting moments that you're going to be having, and we're all having them together.
Yes. Okay. So I turned 40 last year, and when that happened, I was like, I do not care what anybody else thinks. And even before that, I try to be very honest and share many updates on Grayson's progress with dyslexia, because of this exact reason. There's just not a lot of information. There is a lot of parents feeling like, did I do something wrong? There's something wrong with me. Did I pass this on to them? Did I cause this in some capacity? There's just a lot of worrying about, sorry, what other people think, what other parents think. And my thing is, why would I care? Like, all I want to do is what's best for my son, and that is it. And I have not experienced that. I mean, I don't know what people say, when I'm not listening, but none of that matters. So, and just your thing about every child has different challenges, of course.
Absolutely.
So, but I think when you're neurodiverse, and then there's these expectations of the kids that are kind of over here and learning a certain way. I mean, and there's kids that learn different ways for so many different reasons.
Absolutely. Right.
Especially with this online learning, I think we're finding that a lot of
Yes.
kids, there's just, okay, well, certain kids do better, but not other ones. Okay. So, I think one of the biggest challenges is just accepting that you didn't do anything wrong, that this is just something that he just is this way. To me, it's a gift. So there's a book I read, it's called The Gift of Dyslexia.
Yes.
I think it's fantastic. It was one of the first books I've read. I also love The Out of Sync Child. That's for sensory processing, but I do think it helps help you understand a lot of things that are going on, because just in my experience, I don't know any kids who are neurodiverse that don't have some of those things. I mean, everybody actually has. When I read it, I'm like, now I understand why my friend that was 5 did this, and why I get frustrated in traffic. We all
absolutely, we all have those pieces. Yes,
right. And I have a lot of blogs on my site about like the 7 senses, because there's proprioceptive and vestibular that a lot of people don't talk about. But it's very different challenges because it's not talked about. It's not the normal experience, and so you don't hear about it, and so you do feel very lonely. And I feel lonely all the time still. I mean, I think parents feel lonely for lots of reasons now. But I wish that people would feel more comfortable and be more open. And I think being able to, find people like you and, finding other moms. I mean, I have people who email me and DM me every single week, and I do get a lot of DMs, but I will always stop as soon as I see a message from a mom. It's usually an extremely long message. And I will, I'm like, whatever I can possibly do to help this person who's going through this journey. I know I've been there. It's really, really, really hard. It's emotionally hard. It's mentally hard. The acceptance of everything. Because a lot of times you expect, you have pictures of what your child's going to be, right? And so very few people are like, I'm expecting my child to have these specific issues and challenges. And so I think that's a really, really hard piece. I will say for Grayson, it has taught me patience. I've never been the most patient person, but he's really, really, really taught me patience. I learn from him every day. Grayson is what I consider a very complete thinker. So I would ask Gray, even when he was younger, what was your favorite day this week? And he'd be like, Mommy, it's only Wednesday. I can't tell you because I haven't had 2 days. And I was like, oh, the dyslexia mind thinks in a different way. There's a lot of information gathering. I call it the engineering or kind of major problem solving. But he's taught me just a different way of viewing things. Grayson is the most empathetic child. I mean, I think he's very much an empath, but he very much feels people's energy. He is so sweet. He's so loving. If a kid's having a hard day or, something's going on, I mean, he makes friends with everyone. He's very well liked. He's just that kid that everybody loves. He's so sweet. He's so lovable. He loves to help people. He loves to go out of his way, for people. He's just such a sweet, loving, friendly boy. I mean, and he's one of those kids that is friends with just as many girls as boys. I mean, I remember dropping off in preschool and the girls would be like, hi, Gray. And I was like, with my daughter, she's like, I'm only playing with the girls. This is not you boys. He's such a sweet, loving boy. And I think that a lot of times too, we can focus so much on the things that are wrong and not see the amazing gifts our kids have. That's why I love that book, The Gift of Dyslexia, and just learning through him. It's helped me see the world differently from having this child. And I also think that a lot of times we're given different things that we kind of need. I can help him and he helps me too, and has helped me evolve as a person.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and I think too, going back to that challenging piece, because some people also call, neurodiversity and dyslexia, they also say that it's an invisible disability because, if your child's sitting in a classroom answering questions in the math class or whatever, no one's going to walk by and say, oh, he's dyslexic. And so that to me is part of that challenge too, because other people have certain expectations, and it's okay that, that our kids don't fit in that square peg. But unfortunately, with education, with public education, a lot of times they're trying to fit everybody, and, they're teaching everybody one way. And, it sounds like you have the benefit of having some teachers that are OG trained and are able to really embrace and think outside the box with him. And so that, too, I think is part of the challenge, not only, like you said, getting over kind of the part of you've not done anything wrong and getting through your own fears and concerns of what did I miss. And then you run into that challenge that really never goes away because you run into people and they don't really get it. And, with it being 1 in 5, that they know kids that are dyslexic, they just don't know they know, right?
Right. And so I've had an autoimmune disease since I was 11. That's also invisible. So I get that
You get it.
more
Yeah.
so than yes. And you can't see it. And so it is hard, but I think another thing that's really important is to teach our kids the language to use to advocate for themselves, and also
Absolutely.
what to say, so they can say, I have dyslexia, my brain works a little bit differently, and you can kind of, have conversations with your kids. I find the best time to do that is usually like the cuddle time, like before bed, especially with boys tend to sometimes not always like want to, especially my son's 9.5 now, so he doesn't always want to like talk about his
Right.
the big feelings and stuff. But I think teaching your kids the right language can really help, because I am finding that especially the young, I don't even know what the younger generation that my kids are in is called. Somebody told me the other day, but I tend to find kids are very open. I mean, they watch YouTube videos of kids speaking languages that they don't even speak. And I'm like, you want to watch this for 40 minutes? Like, yes, great. So I find that kids are very open. So having that, and having a child that can come and tell you that when you're younger, like, had I known more about what dyslexia was when I was a child, that would have helped me. I didn't know. Like, and I'll be very honest about that. So yeah, that's definitely hard.
Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. All those pieces were very, very helpful. The next thing I want us to talk about just for a few minutes before we wrap up is one of the things I want to talk about for, really celebrating moms in the month of May. And I know right now we're actually recording this and it's still, we're still in the pandemic pieces, and it looks different everywhere depending on where you are. Geographically. But when I think about this topic is self-care. And for us moms, we just give. And at least I can speak for myself. I've tried really hard to make that a priority for self-care. But, the pandemic and working from home full time and, children being at home full time, especially in the last year as far as the pandemic. But so I know this, because I say all that to say I know it might look different today than it looked a year ago or a year and a half ago. But what are some things that maybe you do currently? What are some things you're looking forward to getting back to that you do for yourself? Because I want moms to hear that you have to put like they say, if you can't pour from an empty cup. You got to put your oxygen mask on first before you help someone else, or you're going to be on the floor. And so often, unfortunately, as moms, we do just put everybody before ourselves. So I would love for you to share some pieces of self-care that you're doing. And if you're kind of in limbo right now, that's fine. Or some things that you've enjoyed doing in the past that you look forward to doing, hopefully again here in the short future.
It's very timely because I've been talking a lot about self-care recently. And I just read, it was like one of those viral blog pieces, but it was like, going to Target and shopping is not self-care. Because,
I love that.
like, you were trying to remember what everybody wants. That is not self-care.
Right.
So, although I do love that. Okay. So
unless you go by yourself, if you go by yourself with no kids, it might be self-care, right? I'm joking.
She was just saying that, like, you're trying to remember what this person wants and you're doing with all these other things, but
right.
Yeah,
It's not you time. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So what I'm finding, just because, like I said, both my kids were home all day, every day, that's changing as of next week. And my husband's home and we have two puppies. It is hard for me to find the normal. I've always had a list of self-care things that I've gone to, and that to me is really helpful. So the most important ones to me are working out. And right now, obviously, not everybody can do that. So getting outside in nature every day. I've read so many articles recently about how helpful it is to your mental health. So sometimes I'll even do Zooms like this or calls like this outside. But if you can just spend some time, I know it's very cold for a lot of people right now, but bundle up. If you can go, you can take like a socially distant hike with a friend. I know it's hard to get together with friends right now too, but I notice I usually call friends when I'm in the car and catch up with them. I'm never in the car. I don't do that anymore. So I just don't talk to that many of my friends. We'll text and stuff. So what I've like to do is doing like quick audio messages to friends, and we'll audio message back and forth. I like that. Listening to podcasts like this, I love. Sometimes what I'll do when I'm cooking dinner is I'll put a podcast in and with my AirPods, and then you get interrupted. But mommy's just listening to a podcast right now.
Right.
Might not seem like self-care, but to me it is. It like feeds my
No.
soul. Baths are always that way. Putting on a mask. Sometimes I'll even do masks with the kids. What are some other ones that are really? Oh, reading a book. And like I think sometimes like books don't have to be these like big overwhelming things. You don't always have to read like these like real like what I call like like better. I don't even know why I do that because it's total BS. But anyways, after watching Bridgerton, I've read all of the books. Now I'm reading the prequel. They're easy reading. They're so much fun. And also, I think it's really good for kids with dyslexia to see you reading.
Yes.
Because I just think it's always good for kids to kind of do that. So those are kind of the main ones right now. But obviously, when things come back, like I love getting my nails done and just doing anything that you can for yourself.
Yeah, because I think it is just so important. And I was I can't remember the name; it just escapes me right this minute. But I'll put it in the show notes. There was a book that I saw that was recommended by someone, and I've been reading it, and he talks about in his book. It's like, I don't know, I'll butcher it, so I'll just put it in the show notes because I can't remember the exact name of the book. But anyway, he was talking even about the 1 minute pause, and that you can use it throughout your day. So even if you are, in that chapter in your life where things are busy, like us that have young kids at home, or because the pandemic, everybody is at home, then, even just, walking to your bedroom and taking a minute to take some deep breaths, just kind of push everything out of your mind, that even just that can be completely life-changing. I mean, I know that's kind of probably seems kind of overkill, but he said it was such a change to his mental health. And so I think and I say that because I did think that was very enlightening, but I also want moms to hear that it doesn't have to be some elaborate thing. Like you said, it could be a warm bath. It could be just, it can be just taking a minute. Like if you feel like and we've all been there, right? Where we're like, okay, I am going to pull my hair out, and I'm a redhead, so I get there really quickly sometimes. And so, yes, the patience thing I have definitely learned over time. But sometimes you just have to walk in the other room and count to 10. And that is a piece of self-care. You're recognizing your own emotions and where you are in the moment, and that, okay, everybody is here. And I just need to go to the closet for a minute to look for something that who knows what that's going to be, but it's really my 1 minute pause. And so, I think it can be my point is it can be as small or as large as you want it to, as long as it recharges you and gives you a chance to catch your breath.
Right. So I call that closet time.
I love that.
I've always had my closet time.
You have that too. Okay, there we go.
Yes. I keep my gluten-free snacks in there because my kids love them. And I'm like, these are expensive, guys. Okay. But I love my closet time. I actually just posted about this on a brand's account like 2 weeks ago, my closet time. But the closet is like my magical place where like people don't follow me. I used to say that like just even doing like a little bit of makeup and things like that can be self-care because kids tend to not follow you in there, but now my daughter does. So closet time is my thing. And the other thing is, just in closet time, it's just like my kind of magical place where it's like my little sanctuary, and I can do all those different things. Sometimes I'll just go in there and play playing games on your phone, like just like a fun little game. That could be a nice thing. What was I going to say? Okay, wait, I'm not sure you can cut this part out. Okay, what was I just going to say? I was going to tell you. Oh, okay. So in the fall, I noticed that I was struggling with a lot of this. We had just moved to a new house. We had so many things going on. The kids just started school. Their new school was so much more demanding online than it was in the springtime. So I actually took a course online, and I used to meditate a lot when I was younger. And I'm like, I can't even, I started and I'm like 20 seconds later, my brain is everywhere. So
Right.
I actually learned in this class many other ways to do kind of forms of meditation that are quick, like you said. So there's mantras you can do. So those are really easy things where you're like, I am calm. And, you just like kind of say things to yourself. And I even do this with my son. And then there's just several other ways you can do like a progressive body relaxation. And again, that's a good thing to do with my kids, like at nighttime. But like you said, meditation and these things don't have to be this major thing. They even taught us one where you eat something that you really enjoy, like a sweet. I do this with macaroons. And you try to notice all the flavors and everything that's going on. So you're kind of tuning everything else out. So I was going to say kind of my sweets. I know some people like go into like some body dysmorphia and all these types of things, but sometimes when you're having a hard day, I just need like a sweet in my closet.
Right.
And just,
I can relate.
But like, yeah. So she was actually explaining, so you really focus on all the different sensations, how your body's feeling, and it's actually extremely relaxing, and it helps tap into your parasympathetic nervous system. That's what meditation does. And that's what the chanting and all these other things. So like you said, that 1 minute thing might seem silly, but it's really, really, really helpful.
It really does work. That's what I tell people. I know it may sound strange out loud to say, but if you will go try it, I guarantee you'll tell a difference. And there was another person I interviewed a while back on one of my episodes, and she was talking about doing the mantra, but she said she even puts it on a sticky note on her mirror in her bathroom, so she reminds herself. And sometimes she'll even put it like as a reminder on her phone: "You are amazing," or "Take a breath," or "It's okay to make a mistake," whatever it might be that she's working on. And so she would have little reminders on her phone that would pop up to remind her throughout the day. And I think, all of those pieces, just feed the soul. And so that's just so important.
Right. And you can do, like, I've done this with friends too, where we'll like message each other certain things. I know on the new iOS, there's some different widgets you can get, and they'll send you different things. You can like kind of type in what you want. So I just have like some motivational stuff throughout the day, like 7 times. I'm a big Post-its everywhere fan, but yeah, whatever it is that you need to do that feeds your soul, like no judgment there whatsoever.
Absolutely. And just finding time to figure out what that is for you. And if it's something feels weird, try it a time or two more. It may just be it's something new, especially with like meditation and stuff. Sometimes you have to kind of get in a mindset for that. But if something doesn't fit, then try something else. You'll find something, and you may have something like you may have done 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and before you had kids, and you just need to tap into that and continue to take care of yourself.
The other one I love to do, I forgot, is a gratitude journal.
Yes.
That is, I love, love, love doing. And so just sometimes with the kids, we'll just say like our favorite things during the day, like what we're grateful for that day. Sometimes I'll just write them down. And I have one that has prompts. And so I'll kind of go and find the one. And sometimes they're like, I don't want to say silly, but that to me is really, really, really helpful to focus on the things that we're really grateful for. I'm the type of person that I know there's this like whole toxic positivity culture. And so I definitely feel these things, but I also feel like you can shift your mind. And when you focus on what you're grateful for, then it can make the things that are challenging and things seem more, you can kind of put it more in perspective, I guess is the best way to say it.
And I completely agree. And that's so important because there is so much, especially at the beginning, well, really probably throughout, but especially at the beginning, it seems like there's just such a heavy weight. And even when you get the identification and it's still so new and you're learning so much, it just feels so overwhelming. And so those pieces are just important to remind moms. I mean, they seem obvious, but sometimes you just need to hear someone else say them. And then you're like, okay, I need to make that a priority. All right. So
sorry, I just wanted to touch on one thing. So I just had my son's triannual review, and I did not know what this was until this. I didn't even know it happened. So I just wanted to share with some of the newer parents who are going through this. So a triannual review is every 3 years, your child's going to have a complete gamut of new testing and all the different things for their IEP. So we just went through this, and it was very intensive. But we learned so many great things. They were able to do more testing on him now that he's a little bit older. And they were actually able to tell me, so they were telling us about like the 3 different types of dyslexia, although some people say there's more, but it was really interesting. So they were actually able to show that he was doing really well. Like he tested like almost in like the low average range in one area, solely because of his Orton Gillingham and because of how far he's come. And one thing that the woman that helps us at his school, had kind of told me about is some kids that are getting a lot of tutoring can actually not test for services for IEP, or sorry, for dyslexia, but then there can be other things. And obviously, like, I think there's a lot of stigmas around IEPs because a lot of people think that there's always going to be a fight. I've had really, really, really good experiences. So I just want people to also go understand the process. Our new school district, we since we moved in summer, we're in a new school district. Our new school district goes above and out of their way for these kids with special needs. And I've met just such fantastic people. They actually increased his time. So he was getting 60 minutes a week. Previously, now he's getting 45 minutes a day. Wow. And then after we had that call, his teacher actually reached out to me because we committed to an online school within our district for this year. And she reached out to me and she's like, he's not going to be able to get the proper supports that he needs right now. And like, even though we've become so close with her too, she's like, I really think he needs to transfer. And so that was something that we decided to do this week. And thankfully I've become close with his principal, and the principal reached out to make sure he got the right teacher. It all happened within like 14 hours this week. But so, yeah, I just wanted people to know that like those do evolve and change, and you can actually get more services. And I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, no, that's a great point because, and like you said, as our children get remediated, then some of those areas that they were struggling in, they might start kind of leveling off, or they may even not even start hitting those kind of indicators for more formalized testing. But then, like you talked about, I think at the very beginning of the podcast, so many students, I mean, I know every mom I've spoken to, and I'm sure there's some outliers, right? Children always seem to have something else, ADHD or dysgraphia or speech or OT. There's always, I like to kind of call them sister diagnoses. So that's not the medical word, but people call them comorbidity. I don't really like that. Co-occurrence. I know one guy called it co-occurrences. I was like, I think I can live with that. But I mean, I guess the point is that sometimes people, like I've talked to moms and they get really upset because they've tested out of one area. And no, that's a celebration. They've tested out of that area. It's been remediated. It worked. And then if there's some other pieces, if there's depression or anxiety or ADHD, now we can shift our priority there. So I appreciate that you brought that out because that's important for people to hear. That is actually the question I was going to ask you. So I'll let you elaborate, which is there any advice that you would want to share with moms that are just starting out on the journey?
Yeah, so the sensory processing thing, I think, is something that not a lot of people talk about also. We were really fortunate when he was in preschool. His preschool teacher was really highly trained in this area. And she called me in for a conference one day and was actually showing me videos of a few things that he was doing. Again, I had no idea what she was talking about. But so she had suggested getting him tested. And it is a little harder. I think now it's a little bit easier, but at the time, sensory processing wasn't as accepted by insurance. So we went to his PED, and his PED was very familiar with it, and wrote up an OT referral for fine motor skills. And then at that time, he was getting services for vestibular and proprioceptive. He needed extra inputs. And then he was overly sensitive to noise. And like you said, so that's completely gone away. It very occasionally pops up, but he mostly has grown out of that. He's mostly grown out of some of these other things. But a lot of what I've read is that kids that are older develop coping skills. And I think you were saying that for dyslexia too. So as a young child, they don't know how they can take themselves out of situations that are too loud. As adults, we know how to do that. We don't always have a choice, but we have more options. And so now that he's gotten bigger, he can voice things. I'm not liking this. Or I know also, if we're going to a place like Disneyland, he's going to be overwhelmed at a certain point. I'm going to bring his iPad. He does, I know some of the things he doesn't like as much. And then I think you also brought up the anxiety point, and I think that comes into play with a lot of kids too. And that's something that he just got some testing. He was feeling a little bit off balance. So we just went through some vestibular testing and auditory, and now we're going to kind of work on that piece. So yeah, different challenges pop up, and I think challenges aren't the right word. I know you were saying that earlier. But everybody has things that pop up
Absolutely.
that we need to address, like
That's
we've
really
all had.
parenting in general, right?
Right. Yeah,
Things happen.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But, I just think it is harder on the parents of kids with dyslexia and a lot of
Mhm.
special needs because sometimes you're like, another thing, or like
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
it is a weight, no matter what you say, like when
Yeah.
you have, because you're always somewhat more worried about them.
Hmm.
You might be worried about what's going on here. So his new teacher called me yesterday. She just got the message. She was in the class. She called me as soon as school ended. And one of the things I said is, spelling will always be a challenge. My son has very severe dyslexia. And she was like, oh, we need to do spelling test. And then his school does so many great things. So he started doing speech to text this year. And he was qualified for that at his old school too. So they have rooms in between each classroom. They can go into at any time. Because I was like, how is he going to be writing?
Yeah.
Like when the class is silently writing, how is he going to be doing speech to text in the classroom? It's going to be so disturbing. Are the kids going to be like, what's wrong with him? He can go into this classroom at any time. And I'm like, that is the most incredible thing. They also have a resource center he can go into anytime he wants. And he'll get pulled into there for 45 minutes. And a lot of times it will be during this writing and reading time. But I was just so impressed at how many things that our new school does for him. And has already set up. Like she was saying, what are the things he needs on his computer? We had talked about the speech to text, and I just said, it's what's it called? Sorry, I know you can cut this out too. What is that called? Not a widget. It's the things you can. Oh, an extension. Okay, sorry.
An extension, yeah, like a Chrome
Yeah,
extension or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So she was asked about the Chrome extension, and she emailed me back 30 minutes later and said it's already been taken care of for him. So I do want to say that like we can have some great experiences, and it is good that she called me. I mean, I'm sure she called me specifically because of the how this all happened. I'm sure she was appraised of it, but she just wanted to ask me where he was, how things are doing, if there's anything in particular that's great. And I think so many teachers are really, really fantastic. But those are just some of the things that we've kind of had this experience. And I do also want to say, I do know in California, I mentioned earlier, there is some special legislation that was specifically designed to spread awareness to teachers about dyslexia so that they could start trying to pinpoint it earlier. The earlier you get a diagnosis, the better the outcome. Gray's now reading at a level M, which is an early third grade, which is like makes my heart so happy for him. Obviously, like, anytime you get a diagnosis, great, but like really, really, really push for these early diagnoses. Just because to me, the biggest one is the confidence piece. Like Gray is so confident in himself and his abilities. And then LAUSD actually put in a dyslexia curriculum. Like I said, we had our school had paid to get this, and you have to pay to get the Orton Gillingham materials, and it's very expensive. So a group of parents had put together this whole movement, and so last school year they had actually started this amazing curriculum. And so I think if there's more pushes for this and more pushes for this awareness, there's a legislator, I think he's is he in Mississippi, I believe. He's actually trying to push for a Senate bill to have most prisoners evaluated for dyslexia. And he was finding that a huge percentage of prisoners have dyslexia, and they've kind of fallen through the cracks here. And in that way, they can kind of evaluate them and help them while they're behind bars. My heart just breaks because, like I said, we've been really fortunate to be able to afford to pay for certain things. Like you said, your child's in, a private school. Not everybody can afford these things. Not everybody can even have the advantage of being able to have all the time with their children, after school and doing the work so that they can even understand and know what's going on. So that's going to make it so much harder for them to be able to advocate because you're not always seeing these little clues and stuff. So it really does hurt my heart that there are all these little kids in the world, and I have people that reach out to me that are 19, 20, and they're like, my mom didn't listen to me. And like we said, there is different norms and different stigmas, but I wish that there was just more knowledge that teachers had so that then when they're seeing these clues, with kids, a couple of other ones I just want to throw out there really quickly, but my son was a lot of kids with dyslexia tend to be really early at a lot of milestones or really late. So my son was a really early walker, early crawler, all these things, really late talker. And that's very common for kids with dyslexia. And he was getting speech, but that was a big struggle for us. And then when he was 2.5, he just started speaking in full sentences. So those are just a couple of things. So looking back and then looking at some of these sensory things, we're like, okay, there are all these pieces that were coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There are pieces of the puzzle, but I didn't know what the bigger puzzle was. So I'm hoping with, amazing women like you, and all these other people that are doing this. And we just hope that we can get more bills passed so that more teachers, especially in the really young grades, have this very specialized, they just know what things to look out for.
Right. So it sounds like really when we talk about this last piece is really the one is awareness and knowledge of people that are involved, the educators, the parents. But then the other piece is going back to what we talked about earlier, Rachel, which is just that partnership and, asking questions and understanding what's available and really just, being open and available and having conversations with the educators and really, realizing that they are on your team, whether you like it or not, they're on your team. So why not embrace that and really have conversations with them, because it can absolutely and will absolutely make a difference. And if they're not educated, many times people don't go into education to make money, right? They go into education because they care about children and they want to make a difference. And many times, they want to be trained, like you said, but sometimes it is a money factor that districts don't have the money to educate everyone that needs to be educated. But many times you can share books with them, or you can share a podcast, or you can share articles, or, there are ways that we can help educate subtly, and also where we're not, necessarily hurting a relationship by saying we know everything, but just helping them learn. But I think those pieces are just so important, when we're talking about that advice for starting out their journey, is educating yourself, helping educators where they need education. And then just know that there is a lack of awareness. And part of our journey, whether we like it or not, is we are going to have to help educate along the way and advocate and teach our children how to do that. Right. And so we have to role model that so they can see what that looks like. And so there's just, we take on so many hats that we didn't know we were going to take on as a parent the day they gave us this beautiful child. And so with these children, we just have these amazing opportunities. But one of the things I want to say last, Rachel, is you said this earlier, which is it is, I think, probably the biggest gift is that our children are also teaching us so much, right? So much about dyslexia, but then just so much about life and being empathetic and just listening to other moms. And I mean, there's just a whole nother level of me as a person and as an adult that I wouldn't have had I not gone through this journey and currently going through this journey with my daughter. And it sounds like you can relate to that as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when I was just talking about with my concern for other parents and other kids, it's all empathy, just thinking kind of about that. But Grayson has substantially increased my patience, my understanding of how brains work differently. I mean, I only had my brain, so I didn't know that there was such a variety of
right.
things. But I mean, just with so many different things. I'll give you one last quick story. So my daughter's best friend in kindergarten last year, who is working on a diagnosis right now. We were at the farmer's market, our local farmer's market, and it was like the Sunday right before school was starting after winter break. We had a long winter break now, it was 3 weeks. And a lot of the girls, we just all ended up meeting up there. And then we ran into my daughter's best friend. And she was like kind of being pulled in a wagon with her brother. And my daughter was like, come play with us. And all the kids were asking her to come play. And she was just like, she kind of turned them down and said no. And her mom sent all these text messages later in the day apologizing for her and saying, I'm so sorry. And I'll share with you that I wrote a blog and an Instagram post about it, but I was like, you don't need to apologize for this child. Like, I understand exactly what's going on here. And I don't know if I would have before I had Grayson, but I know that, I've just kind of had learned about her and I'd observed certain things about her, and a lot of times she liked to play with my daughter kind of like more one-on-one, and she could get overwhelmed, and it had been a long time. And I was like, you don't need to apologize for your daughter. Like, she kind of viewed it as, I don't know the right word to say, like like being standoffish, I guess, or kind of
Right.
like being like rude. And I was like, your
Hmm.
daughter was none of those things. She was expressing her needs and she was feeling overwhelmed at the time. And like, you don't need to apologize for this. Like, she's just a normal little girl and this is how she was feeling this day. And like, I totally understand what she was going through. And I don't think I would have understood any of these things before this, but my heart broke that she felt the need to even apologize.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that, through the experiences I've had and also working and talking to so many moms, our children are making us better people, and better people out in the world. And hopefully that will also resonate with others who will also do the same. And so hopefully we'll see more and more of that. Well, Rachel, thank you so much. And I know we're recording this prior to May, but this is, for Mother's Day. And so I want to tell you early, happy Mother's Day. And thanks for all that you do in your work and with your children. And just thank you so much for giving to our community. I so appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening today, and happy Mother's Day to you. You are an amazing warrior mom, and together we can do hard things, right? Are you new to dyslexia? If you are and you're looking for more resources, then go to dyslexiamomlife.com/start here, where I have resources for you from blog articles, other podcast episodes you can listen to, and also free resources. And do you want to connect with our guest this month? Then be sure to go to dyslexiamomlife.com to find each of the episodes listed there from this month so you can connect with all these amazing moms on our podcast. And we have a special episode that we're going to be releasing on May 31st, so you don't want to miss that. Be sure to subscribe, though, because we are going to be releasing these Mother's Day episodes throughout the month of May. Have a great day, and remember, you got this.